Walter mentioned?
Yeah, he said he stabbed somebody, I guess.
I remember the moment her life slipped away beneath my hands. The way her eyes widened in terror, how she clawed desperately at my fingers wrapped around her throat. I could feel her pulse race beneath my fingers, going away up through the veins of my arms, but I didn't stop. In that moment, I knew I had crossed a line from which there was no return, but this was just the beginning. It was October 6th, 2019, just another Sunday night at Buddha Live on McGregor Boulevard in Fort Myers, Florida. I kept trying to convince my girlfriend Melissa to go to this guy Jason's house with me, but she wasn't having it. Whatever. I took her car and left her there. That's when I met Christine Melton and her friend Stephanie. They seemed like fun girls, up for a good time. I introduced myself and she fell for my charms. Well, for the Prince Charming I was that night. Christine and I hit it off right away. We flirted, laughed. There was definitely an attraction there. We all ended up going back to Jason's place for a bit.
Little did Christine and Stephanie know that they had invited a predator into their midst. Wade Wilson, a 25-year-old with a troubled past and dangerous intentions, was about to set in motion a series of events that would shock the community of Cape Coral, Florida. His actions over the next 24 hours would leave 2 women dead and countless lives shattered. This is the chilling story of Wade Wilson, a man who would later claim he killed for the sake of killing.
A few hours later, I offered to drive the girls back to Christine's place in Cape Coral. Only problem was, I didn't really know how to drive stick shift. I was in Melissa's car that I'd taken earlier. We made it there eventually, though. Stephanie had to leave, something about taking her kid to school in the morning. She hugged Christine goodbye, said she'd see her tomorrow. If only she knew that, out of nowhere, I felt an overwhelming urge to end her friend's life. It wasn't personal. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, as soon as Stephanie was gone, I made my move. Christine had dozed off. I climbed on top of her and wrapped my hands around her throat. She barely put up a fight. I choked that bitch, I told my dad later. I hung around the house for a while after, tried to roll up the body to put it in her car trunk. But suddenly she became too heavy for me to lift, too stiff to move. So I just took her car, a black Nissan Vera, and left her there. It was early morning by then, maybe 8 or 9 a.m. I called Melissa at work, wanted to know where she was. She was pissed about me taking her car the night before. That made me angry. Who did she think she was? Didn't she know what I was capable of? She better not think too highly of herself or else... Well, I was going to show her. The adrenaline was still pumping through my system. I needed more. I went to meet her at her work in downtown Fort Myers. I was still in Christine's black Nissan. As soon as Melissa came out, I grabbed her, tried to pull her into the car. She fought back, though. I ended up tackling her, punching and choking her right there in the parking lot.
Wilson's attack on his girlfriend Melissa Montanez just showed his volatile and violent nature. Standing 6'6" tall, he towered over the 5'2" Montanez. Witnesses described seeing Wilson drag her up the stairs to her workplace, holding her against the wall by her throat. At that moment, she didn't know if she was going to be thrown over. The only thing she was sure of was that she was going to die that day at the hands of her boyfriend.
I hit Melissa hard, straight in the face. Blood went everywhere. While I was distracted by that, she managed to duck away and run off. Whatever. I didn't care about her anymore. I got back in the Nissan and took off. I headed back to Cape Coral. That's when I saw her, Diane Ruiz, just walking down the street, probably on her way to work. Easy target. I pulled up next to her, asked for directions, and pretended I was confused and couldn't understand. Told her to hop in and show me the way. To be honest, I think she saw what was coming next because she hesitated for a moment before getting into the car. But either way, she did. As soon as she was in, I went for her throat. Choked her while I was driving. I remember the exact moment I decided to kill her. You see, this wasn't planned. No, I swear, it was just there. The urge, the need. as if her own neck was begging me to take all the air away. And I did. When her eyes were pleading for mercy, I felt nothing. No remorse, no hesitation, nothing. I drove to an empty lot and dumped her body there. But as I was about to leave, I noticed she was still breathing. So I got back in the car and ran her over, again and again, until she stopped moving completely.
The brutality of Wade Wilson's crimes is difficult to comprehend. His seemingly random selection of victims and the savage nature of the murders paint a picture of a man devoid of empathy or human connection. But what drives someone to commit such heinous acts? Diane Ruiz was a 43-year-old mother of two, simply walking to her job at the local Moose Lodge, had no reason to suspect the danger that approached in a stolen black Nissan. Wilson's brutal actions, strangling Ruiz, dumping her body, then repeatedly running her over, speak to a level of violence that is difficult to put in words.
After disposing of Diane's body, I felt invincible. I ditched Christine's car at Joe's Crab Shack later that afternoon. Some cop tried to stop me there, said something about a battery charge. I just rolled up the window and took off. Ended up breaking into some empty house in Cape Coral that night. The owners were out of town. I helped myself to their White Claws and food, borrowed some clothes. The urge to kill was still there. Don't ask me how, but I knew the police had already found the bodies and would soon be coming after me. I could feel it. I could hear the sirens in the distance. They were closing in. I called my father to brag about what I had done. I was proud of myself. I didn't care about the police. "I'm a killer," I said. "There are 2 people gone who are not coming back." My dad ratted me out to the cops, though. They found me there the next day and arrested me. I didn't feel bad about what I'd done. I told the police with great pride. I described in detail how I'd killed them, how I'd run Diane over until she looked like spaghetti. I shared everything. Those were my achievements, and I would do it again.
As the horrific details of Wilson's crimes came to light, the Cape Coral community was left in shock. 2 innocent women, Christine Melton, 35, and Diane Ruiz, 43, had been brutally murdered within hours of each other. The encounters were random and shockingly violent. People were just stunned. There was no way to explain that this was happening here, let alone that pure evil was walking around like it was nothing.
In the days after my arrest, the cops were scrambling to put it all together. They found Christine's body pretty quick. Her friend Stephanie had gotten worried when she couldn't reach her. Diane's body took a few more days to turn up. Some cops searching an empty lot spotted vultures circling overhead. That's where they found her, decomposing in the October heat. The bugs were eating away at what was left of her. I gave a full confession eventually, told the detectives everything. I knew in my mind I wasn't going to drop her off, I said about Diane. As soon as she went to get out, I grabbed her by the neck and choked her. She came back to life 3 or 4 times. I mean, she was a fighter for sure, I'll give her that. I explained how the urge to kill had just come over me, how it came across my mind to murder, just murder. I could tell she was getting scared. I saw the fear, and I think the fear triggered me to just kill her.
Wade Wilson's confession felt like opening up the mind of a sick killer. He described how he murdered each victim in shocking detail, showing no empathy or remorse. Instead, he seemed to take pleasure in the power he had over them, likening himself to a predator playing with its prey, as if they were trophies he had won. He even admitted that if given the chance, he would do it again. This complete lack of basic human compassion makes you wonder, is Wade Wilson the true definition of pure evil?
They charged me with 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus grand theft, battery, burglary, and petty theft. I knew I was looking at some serious time, but I didn't care. I would do it again. While I was waiting for my trial, I got into some more trouble. Got caught with meth in jail. Then my cellmate and I tried to escape through a window. That didn't work out too well. My trial finally started in June 2023. I decided not to testify. Let my lawyer do the talking. He tried to argue that I was on drugs, that the murders weren't premeditated. Said I was whacked out of my mind. My own father testified against me, telling them everything I'd confessed to him. It only took the jury 2 hours to find me guilty on all counts.
We, the jury, finds as follow as to the defendant in this case. Count 1, first-degree murder, Christine Melton. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2, grand theft motor vehicle. The defendant is guilty of grand theft motor vehicle. Count 3, battery. The defendant is guilty of battery. Count 4, first-degree murder, Diane Ruiz. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder.
The quick guilty verdict brought some sense of justice for the families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, but it could never take away the pain and loss they experienced.
During my sentencing hearing, they brought in all these doctors and experts to talk about my mental state. One neurologist, Dr. Mark Rubino, said scans showed evidence of brain trauma, claimed I had impairment with short-term memory and cognitive and emotional problems. I told the doctor about some car accidents I'd been in growing up, how I'd hit my head on the windshield once, got knocked out another time, said I'd had concussions from football and baseball too, got jumped a few times. The doctor seemed to buy it, said my impulsiveness and overwhelming emotion could be explained by head injuries. Another shrink diagnosed me with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, you name it. Said I had a neurocognitive impairment, but the state's expert wasn't buying it. He said there wasn't enough evidence for all those diagnoses. Thought my extensive drug use was a more likely explanation for my behavior. In the end, it didn't really matter. The jury recommended the death penalty for both murders. On October 28, 2023, the judge made it official, sentenced me to death. He called my actions heinous, atrocious, and cruel, said I'd shown absolutely no remorse. Can't argue with that, I suppose.
The sentencing of Wade Wilson to death marked the end of a long and painful chapter for the community of Cape Coral. But it raised as many questions as it answered. What could drive a person to commit such senseless acts of violence? We don't know yet, but what we do know is that sometimes evil can strike without warning or reason.
So here I am, on death row. You're probably wondering why I did it, why I killed those women. The truth is, I don't really know. It just felt good in the moment. The power, the control, watching the life drain out of their eyes. Maybe it was the drugs. Maybe it was my fucked up brain from all those concussions. Or maybe I'm just wired wrong, born bad.
Wade Wilson's complete lack of remorse, even with a death sentence hanging over him, is really disturbing. His casual attitude toward taking human life is something we can't fully understand. If anything, it just makes us question the evil that exists in the world. As this chapter finally closes, our hearts go out to the families and friends of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. We hope they can find some peace and healing in the years ahead. The memory of these two vibrant women, a devoted friend and a loving mother, will live on forever.